Welcome to this very special webinar, Unshakeable, Awareness, Advocacy, and Education for Parkinson's Disease. I'm delighted to introduce you to Arianna Spurlin. She is Miss Pennsylvania's Teen 2024 and the creator of the book, which is also the title of this presentation today. Without further ado, I would like to introduce all of you to Arianna Spurlin, and she will mention a little bit about her background and her book. And this is an exciting presentation. Thank you very, very much for devoting some time to us today.
Absolutely. So, like she said, my name is Arianna Spurlin. I am currently 17 years old and a senior in high school. I've been fighting for Parkinson's because my grandfather has had Parkinson's now for 13-ish years. I don't know the exact number, but so I've known it my whole life and I've been around it, but my friends have not, which means that they were currently always asking me, what's wrong with him or is he okay? And as a kid, that was really hard for me to answer because I didn't exactly know the answer. And my sister is now at that age where she's getting the same questions. So I started Unshakeable because I want children and adults to understand what Parkinson's disease is and that it's not something we need to be afraid of. That's exactly what that slide says, and you can actually see the picture next to it. That is my logo for Unshakeable, and I started Unshakeable also because as a title holder, we have to have something we think is worth fighting for, and my something worth fighting for has always been Parkinson's disease. So, a little about my book. It's called Pop with Parkinson's. It's a children's book, and it explains in a little girl's point of view what Parkinson's disease is. It says that it's just a boo-boo in the brain, which I think is a great analogy for kids to understand because even adults, when they hear the word disease, they tend to panic and they tend to worry about what is it actually? Am I going to catch it? What's wrong with them? And I think it's important for everyone to understand that, yes, it is something that isn't awesome, but it is also something you can't catch. And it is something you just need to be aware of because the more we know about it, the less we're scared of it. So I always tell little kids that, Parkinson's is a page in someone's book, but it does not make up their whole book. So, a little about what I've been doing is I have had the opportunity of raising $11,000 to go back to the national chapter of the American Parkinson's Disease Association. I've done this through a bowling tournament called Strikeout Parkinson's and a golf tournament. I've also done this through selling my children's book, and selling bracelets that say Unshakable on them because Pennsylvania does not have a chapter of the American Parkinson's Disease Association. So all of my money has really gone towards either the national chapter or my aunt works for the Connecticut chapter. So we've sent some money their way as well. But now my main focus as Miss Pennsylvania's teen is to raise money and get people involved so that we can make a chapter in Pennsylvania. Because it's important to me that the patients with Parkinson's in PA understand they have a community behind them as well. Um, and then just kind of overall, as Miss Pennsylvania's teen, I think it's just really important that we have these conversations and that we're open about it and we understand that, yeah, it's hard to talk about and it's definitely a scary disease. But at the same time, we have to be open to having those conversations because if not, nobody will learn. That's how I learned. My grandfather, who happens to also be on this Zoom call with us, he talked about it and my parents were open to talking about it with me, and that's how I learned what it was. But I'm learning every day. I was just in New Jersey talking to a rock steady boxing class, and they each told me something completely different that I had no idea was even a thing until that day. So it's important to continue having those conversations. And on here, it says again that Parkinson's may take up a page of your book, but it does not make up your whole book, meaning that it plays a part in your life and it affects how you do things on the daily. But if you don't let it shake you, hence unshakable, you won't be stopped. It shouldn't be something that completely stops you from living your life. It should just be a barrier that you have to cross. And I think it's important to remind those with Parkinson's that they do have a community behind them and supporting them, even if everyone doesn't quite understand what they're supporting yet. They will eventually, but they are supporting you and loving you, and that you are never alone in this disease because you always have someone fighting for you behind the scenes that you may just not know about.
Thank you. That was very helpful. And I know that we would like to learn a little bit more about the book. We'll have some questions. Would you like us to open it up to questions now?
Absolutely.
Okay. I'll hold my questions. Okay. To a little bit. All right. If you have a question, please type it in the chat box, or you can go ahead and unmute yourself and ask it in real time.
I promise I won't bite.
Okay. I'll read the question. I know that you can see it, but I'll just read it for you. And that way everyone will, I don't know, I'll just read it. Where can someone purchase the book? Great question.
It's on the Barnes and Noble's website. If you go on to their website and type in Pop with Parkinson's, it'll pop up.
Thank you. And did I hear that there's going to be another book coming out?
There is, however, this one is not about Parkinson's, just because I've seen how well Pop with Parkinson's does with children. It really engages them and gets them learning and thinking about different types of diseases. So my great grandfather on my other side had Alzheimer's. And I had a friend ask me if I would ever be interested in writing something to help her daughter understand that. So we did. We went about and we wrote Pop with Alzheimer's because as much as Parkinson's is important and is a big part of my life, there are so many kids that don't understand these other neurological diseases. So why not have books for each of them to break it down for them?
Thank you. So if that's relevant for you, is that one available too through Barnes and Noble?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Follow me on social media. I'm under Miss Pennsylvania's Teen on Facebook and Instagram. You can see all of my posts and you can see when new things are happening all the time.
Thank you. And we have a few more questions in the chat. I'll read the next question. What is the youngest age that the book is geared to, appropriate for?
I've read it to all ages. I can be honest with that one. I've read it to preschool kids. I've also read it to eighth graders. And I can tell you, the eighth graders definitely roll their eyes more at you when you tell them you're going to read them a children's book. But at the end, they had a lot of questions, which told me that it was engaging them. And even the kindergartners afterwards, they were like, Parkinson's is in the brain. I'm like, you guys are so right. You guys are so smart because the book, it's really geared towards anyone at all.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you. Another question. Arianna, what are some of the things that you've learned about Parkinson's?
I had a guy tell me that he can't eat peanut butter because it makes his tremors worse. I didn't know that was a thing. I didn't know food affected it at all. But then I found out it was because of the protein in the peanut butter. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. And when I was just in New Jersey, they are explaining to me that there are a lot of changes that patients of Parkinson's understand that they can't really explain to people on the outside, but we just have to be willing to understand that things are changing and we just have to be there to look out for them. And I thought that was really cool that they can understand in their own body when things are changing, even though they may not be physical changes or something they can understand. But it also makes it a big point that the community needs to not be so worried of, well, what's wrong with you? We need to be more worried of, well, how can we help you?
Thank you. So it sounds like you're learning along the way, which I can attest to as well. This community is a very intelligent community that shares, and I agree with you also that knowledge is power, and getting the word out is greatly appreciated. So thank you for doing that.
Absolutely.
What? I have another question here. Oh, yeah. So this is an interesting one as well. What kind of questions do the kids ask in response to your book?
Well, the kids, they're a different, I love working with kids because sometimes they're right on point and sometimes they're in another world. My favorite question I've ever been asked is, I read my book and I said, well, does anyone have any questions? And this little girl was very eager to ask me a question. I was like, what's up? And she goes, is your hair real? I was like, well, yes, it's not a wig. Great question. Anybody else? But when it comes to my fifth graders who are very attentive and love listening to books being read to them, they've asked me questions to, do you know the percentage of men versus women who have Parkinson's? Or do you know what part of the brain Parkinson's affects? Or where does it start and how does it start? Questions that I have even sometimes had to step back and be like, wow, I didn't think about it like that. Let me find out for you, because children open a whole different world for us. And I really encourage you to talk to kids about Parkinson's because they will ask you so many questions because they genuinely are just curious. They love to learn, and they'll stump you and they'll make you fall back in your chair because you won't know the answer, but it'll help you learn more because once they ask the question, you want to know the answer.
So it sounds like it's been a wonderful experience for you. And there's different types of questions kind of depending on the ages.
Absolutely.
And sometimes, you know, children don't have maybe the filter that adults do. Maybe, not holding back as much. And I think that could be very helpful.
Absolutely, it is.
Here's another question, Arianna. What is the most surprising thing you were asked? And then what is the most common question you receive?
Mm,
And there's one other part, but I'll wait on that.
yeah. Not Parkinson's related. The most surprising question I was asked was by a fourth grader, and it was during an assembly. And he asked me if I had a boyfriend, and I told him no. And then he asked me if I wanted one. And I was like, you're about 5 years too young, bud. No. But you know, he had to shoot a shot. I give him props for that. He was real confident. But Parkinson's related, the weirdest question I've definitely been asked is if Parkinson's makes you lose your hair. And I didn't really understand where this question came from. But then I found out it was because it's in the brain. And they assume that because it's in the brain, it affects everything going on the outside of your head as well. So they were wondering if all Parkinson's patients were bald. And I was like, no. But that's a great way of thinking of that. And the most common question I've been asked is non-Parkinson's related, do I get paid? The answer is no. I just do this for fun. But I do receive scholarships, so that's a win. And Parkinson's related, the most common question I've been asked is your grandfather okay? And the answer is yes, he is okay. He is still alive and he still has an amazing life and he still loves life.
Thank you. And there is another part to this question. And then I'd love to reflect on your grandfather for a moment. And what is the question you wish you would be asked? What's a question that you're hoping to hear someday?
When I'm a lot older down the road, when the APDA finally comes up with the cure, I think so. I'm so sorry.
Bless you.
Thank you. When the APDA or doctors do come up with a cure, the question I definitely want to be asked is, what is the cure? Because I've had Parkinson's in my life for my whole life basically, and I've been following it, and I know the day the cure comes out, I'm going to be on top of it. I'm going to be like, okay, what is it? Where is it? Who do I need to talk to? And I think that's a really fun question to get to answer for kids because they get like light inside of their eyes when they hear like, oh, someone's going to be okay. Like they're all better now. And when you tell them, oh, well, there is no cure, they get really sad because they're like, oh, that's heartbreaking. But to be able to tell them, oh, there is a cure, I can't wait for the day that I could see that light go off in their eyes. Like, oh my goodness, really?
And I think everyone on this call today is excited for that too. Yeah, I'm going to add in a question and then we'll go to Mike's question. Have any of your audience members asked, like, what are some of the ways to manage Parkinson's? As you shared, there isn't a cure, which we know. It can be very disappointing to hear. I'm sure, especially as a younger person, as a child. Have you been asked, what can you do? And how
Yeah.
do you answer that?
So actually in my children's book, it does talk about how you can get surgery and you can take medication. But on top of that, I strongly encourage rock steady boxing. I have been able to see how it does help Parkinson's patients. And I got to try something new on Friday. I don't know if you guys know that this exists. Ping pong Parkinson's.
Hmm?
That was a blast. I would definitely do it again. I got my butt whooped by all of them, but it was worth it. And it was really amazing to get to see that they were concentrating so hard on the game that their tremors completely went away while they were playing. So I highly encourage those because not only are you having fun and doing something that is exciting, but you're also doing something that can help you with your with Parkinson's, and it can help with the therapy aspects of Big and Loud.
Thank you. And that's wonderful that you include that in the book. I look forward to getting a book soon. I'll definitely purchase one. And if there's others on this call, I encourage you to consider getting a book too, to share. And definitely the exercise piece is so important. I think some of us have heard about ping pong for Parkinson's. What a great way. You get into that flow and then you're focused on the moment and not on Parkinson's.
Absolutely.
Arianna, have you had any, whoops, since the Western PA, Parkinson Foundation Western PA is helping so many families in Pennsylvania, is your fundraising going to them in the future? That was not posed by me, by the way.
It's all good. So I live in northeastern Pennsylvania. So we do not have a chapter of the Pennsylvania Foundation here, I do not believe, or at least I have not heard from them. But this is the first time that I've been communicating with this part of the Parkinson's Foundation. And I do look forward to working with them more. I will have to tell my business manager to get on top of that because I love getting to do all things Parkinson's related. And it's kind of heartbreaking that sometimes I have to go across state borders just to do that. So wherever I can help out in Pennsylvania, I absolutely will.
Thank you. And we'll be in touch about that. And hopefully you can come to our conference in the spring. I know that you're unable to come to Step Forward. You're very busy. Hopefully you can come and meet us all in person. And thank you for raising awareness and funds. Well, we're unique in Western Pennsylvania. We're local 501c3, so we're not a chapter of anything, which gives us a lot of latitude. And the fundraising stays local. So thank you for supporting Parkinson's near and far. Okay, another question. Have you had any children or teens ask if they could help you spread the word, like learning life skills for medicine, public speaking, etc.?
I have. However, sometimes it's just the heat of the moment of there's a pretty girl in a shiny crown and sash standing in front of me. I'm going to do anything I can to make her happy. And sometimes they're very serious about it. I know that I've had children purchase my book and post about it on social media and tag me, or they've DM'd me through social media and they'll ask me, hey, what can I do? Do you have any events I can go to? I think that's really great because I always tell kids, listen, I'd love to hear more from you. Obviously, I cannot give you my personal information, but message me. I would love to talk to you. I'll explain anything you need, whatever you want to talk about. And some of them actually do. Some of them are like, yeah, I'm going to do it. And then they never do it, never hear from them again. But some of them are very quick to message me and be like, okay, I want to know more. Can you tell me more? And that's how I know that I've had a successful day, because I've impacted their life in one way or another. I've put a face to the disease, which is part of my job. That's my favorite. I get to tell a story and I get to tell others stories and I get to put a face to the disease. So it's no longer just a disease. Now it's someone's battling with this.
Thank you. Let's see, any other questions? And please, if it's easier to unmute and ask, go right ahead. Sometimes it takes a little longer to type, at least for me. While we're waiting, I have another question. Arianna, what type of, I know you're spreading awareness, so that's a part of advocacy. Have you explored other areas like speaking to legislators about contributors to Parkinson's and or about like a registry in the state of Pennsylvania? That one doesn't exist. Just, keeping track and having data about the rates of Parkinson's in Pennsylvania.
Yes, I have had the opportunity to go to the state capitol and kind of just talk to them. I got to talk to the chair of ag. He is a very good friend of ours, and he put me in touch with a couple people that work on the medical side. And they've said that they're willing to help me put together a board and to get money down so that we can do more in Pennsylvania. The thing that they actually told me, which was the most surprising, is that the reason we don't have a chapter is because nobody's been willing to start a chapter, which blew my mind, knowing that there are so many patients in PA. Nobody has said something or stepped forward to do it yet. And I said, well, I guess I'm going to be that person. So because I am a minor, I'm only allowed to be the president of a board. I am not allowed to be anything else. So my parents are on board as well. They're very helpful, and we stay in constant communication with the chair of ag and all of his friends to kind of see where we're at in that process and what needs to be done to get further in it.
Thank you. So are you referring to agriculture?
Yes.
Okay, got it. No, that's okay. That's what I thought you were saying. I'm just curious, have they shared anything with you about some of the chemical, like have you talked with them about, I know this is getting on a little bit of a different tangent, but advocacy, kind of paraquat, TCE, some of the pesticides that may be contributing, if that's been brought up.
We have talked about it a little bit, not at great lengths, because it isn't 100% like guaranteed that that's the problem. So
Right.
they don't really want to push anything until they know, oh, that's 100% the issue. Let's get rid of it. But I do know that we've had that conversation because one of my best friends, his grandfather was exposed to Agent Orange because he was in the military and he has Parkinson's now. And they think that Agent Orange was the cause of it. So we've gotten to have that conversation of, okay, what's in our air? What's not great that's in our air? What's in our food? What's in our water? And we've kind of looked at it like, okay, maybe this stuff isn't so great. Maybe this stuff is okay. And we've also looked at what they're doing in other countries to kind of just be like, well, what are we doing? What's going on? And I've had that opportunity to even talk with my family about that of, do you think it's this or do we think it's something else?
Well, thank you for that work and that information, Arianna. Okay, another question. How often do you hear, getting back to your topic, I got off topic a little bit. How often do you hear that someone in the audience's family also has, how often do you hear that someone in the audience family has Parkinson's?
It's very rare at schools, at least, because the children, they don't exactly understand what it is to begin with. So a lot of times I'll be like, do you guys know what Parkinson's is? And I'll get one hand in the air and I'm like, what is it? Well, it's when your foot hurts. I love that you tried guessing, but not quite. That's my favorite. I love when they take a guess at it and I'm like, you're so close. But most of the time they don't know what it is. Or they'll get it confused and say, well, yeah, my grandfather has it. I'm like, really? He's like, yeah, it's where he has dementia and all this stuff. And I'm like, Parkinson's or Alzheimer's? He's like, Alzheimer's. I'm like, wrong conversation. But they're very open to learning about it. And after I've explained it to them, they're like, oh, wait, maybe my grandfather does have that. Or maybe my aunt has that. And I'm like, Okay, well, I love that we're putting puzzle pieces together, but let's ask before we assume.
Hmm. Thank you. So it sounds like there may be connections, and some of these children are getting educated and learning.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Let's see. Maybe a few more questions. I think it's really important to have this intergenerational focus. We would like to do more of that as well. To educate, educate the future generations.
And that I've heard that a lot. I actually received an award at the Connecticut walk for the APDA, and it was because I was the youngest person they had seen fighting for this disease. But that also breaks my heart a little bit because I know I'm still educating my friends on it to this day, and they're 17, 18 years old, and they're looking at me like I have six heads when I tell them about it. So I think it's important to not only get children involved, but teenagers and young adults and everyone involved, because everyone needs to know what this disease is because it will impact you in one way or another. I'm 17, and that doesn't mean it's affecting my life. I don't have the disease, but someone I love has the disease, and that's why I know about it. But that's the same thing. I tell my friends all the time, well, your friend's grandfather has the disease. Don't you want to learn about it as well?
Thank you, Arianna. Let's see. A few more questions came through. This is a comment. I lead a women's support group here in the South Hills of Pittsburgh, and most have grandchildren. I'm really excited to share about your book as a resource for them.
Oh, well, I love that. I was just down, we were just talking about this. I was just down in Pittsburgh like a week ago, but it's a bit of a hike to get there for us.
Right. Well, like I mentioned earlier, maybe you can come out for the conference. We certainly have access to your book no matter what. Okay, another question. Does your book mention that younger people can also have Parkinson's disease?
It does not mention it directly in the book, but I do talk about it because my grandfather had early onset Parkinson's disease. So I'm not going to throw out numbers because he's sitting on the Zoom and I don't want to get his age wrong, and that would be very poor in my taste. But but I do know that he had early onset Parkinson's disease, and I like to talk to the kids a lot about Michael J. Fox because I have never watched his movies and I know they haven't either. But my favorite is like, oh my gosh, like, do you guys know who this guy is? And they're like, no. I'm like, yeah, me either. But let's talk about him. And it
Mm-hmm.
actually gets them engaged. And then they'll end up messaging me and they'll be like, I watched his movie and it was so good. And I'm like, that's fantastic. I love that. But I also know that he had early onset Parkinson's disease. So I know that it's definitely a conversation we always have, but it does not mention it in the book just because I try to keep the book simpler so that children can understand it. And by throwing words like early onset in there, they're kind of like, what does that mean?
Thank you. Another question. Actually, I'll skip to this one and then go back. Have you seen the Michael J. Fox documentary still? Still.
Trying to think. I'm not sure if I have. I know that I am actually going to a Mako J. Fox walk and participating with them in a month or so, I believe. And I've definitely watched some movies that he's in. But when I first got into advocacy for Parkinson's, everyone was like, oh, Michael J. Fox this, Michael J. Fox that. And I was like, who is this guy? But then I actually learned, oh, well, he's famous. And I was like, oh, I was like, maybe I shouldn't be saying, who is this guy? He seems like a big deal. But now that I actually know about him, he is a big deal, not only in the acting side of the world, but also in the Parkinson side of the world.
Well, I recommend it. It came out not long ago. I think 2-ish years ago. Correct me if I'm wrong, anybody.
They're all giving you the head nod of approval.
Okay. It was, thanks. Okay, I'm going back to, and that's wonderful that you'll be involved with the Michael J. Fox Foundation in a month or so. This is regarding practicing medical practice for Parkinson's. It is inspiring students to become movement disorder specialists in part of your plan, because we certainly need more movement disorder specialist neurologists.
Um, yes, But at the same time, I think it's very important to tell them all of the different options. Like, I want to go be a nurse anesthetist, but I do want to have the opportunity to work with Parkinson's patients and be the one that's there while they're having their deep brain stimulation done. Just because I don't think I could handle surgery. I'd probably pass out myself, but I do want to be involved. But I know some of my friends are going to be physical therapists and neurosurgeons and anesthesiologists. So I know that they are getting involved in that aspect of life. But at the same time, there are so many different types of jobs that we need for Parkinson's patients. We need Rock City boxing trainers, and we need people working with ping pong and people doing therapies like the big and loud and speech therapists. Like my mom is a speech language pathologist and she works with Parkinson's patients. So I like being able to lay out all of the different types of jobs, because then kids will be like, well, I want to be a speech therapist. And I'm like, that's fantastic. Then you do that. You don't have to just choose one job to be able to help with Parkinson's.
Thank you. You're really spreading the word. And you're absolutely right that there's many professions that can help someone with Parkinson's. And Parkinson's is a family disease, and I think you're displaying that by mentioning, your aunt and your mother and certainly your grandfather, who's on this call, by the way. Shout out to grandfather. Would you like to say anything regarding your grandfather? Um, you certainly, I don't know if you wanted to introduce him. There's certainly no pressure. I just wanted to acknowledge that he's on the call and he's accompanied by someone.
Yes, that's my grandmother.
That's your grandmother. Okay. I thought so.
So to those who can see everyone in the call at the moment, my grandfather is the one in the red shirt. That's why I was like, I'm not going to say any ages because I don't want to be in trouble. He was my inspiration for Unshakeable. I have seen what it's like growing up with someone who has Parkinson's, and I've seen how it affected him, but also how it affected my family. And that's why I created Unshakeable, because I never want anyone to have to go through those conversations or to be afraid like I was. And like I mentioned before, I have a 12-year-old little sister, and she's at that point where it's like, well, I don't know how to explain this, and you're asking me a lot of questions, and I'm just going to avoid the topic completely. I don't want her to do the same thing that I did, because that's what I did. I was just like, oh, it's fine. Oh, it's fine. It's nothing. It's fine. When the topic does need to be talked about and the conversations do need to be had. So Unshakable started so that people know what we're talking about. They know what we're fighting for, because there is a fight worth fighting. We just have to know what we're fighting for before we go guns a-blazing fighting for it.
Well, thank you for introducing your grandfather and grandmother. We appreciate what you're doing as a community, as Miss Pennsylvania, Miss Teen Pennsylvania role. I did include the link for Pop with Parkinson's through Barnes and Noble. Is that, you just want to make sure that's the correct one?
Yes.
Add it in the chat. Okay. Okay. And let's see. Any last questions, anyone?
And I don't think I mentioned this before, but I said I get scholarships. I mentioned this to Casey earlier. I have a full ride to the University of Alabama. I know that usually shakes some people and they're like, whoa. So my mom always tells me to mention that.
Thank you. I was actually, I'm glad that you said that, because I was going to conclude by asking, what are your future plans?
Yes, I want to be a nurse anesthetist and go to school at the University of Alabama.
And may I ask you a parting question?
Absolutely.
How, or what made you become involved with this position, wanting to become Miss Teen Pennsylvania? Am I saying that correctly? No,
Yes. So
Miss Teen Pennsylvania.
I had no intentions of doing pageants my whole life. I was like, I'm not a pageant girl. But I had to join a new studio right after COVID just because of some personal problems at my old studio. And they were like, you're doing pageants. And I was like, no, I'm not. Love the enthusiasm. It's not happening. And they actually signed me up for my first one. And I was like, you guys have got to be kidding me. But I actually went to my first pageant and I won. I was Miss Luzerne County's teen. And I competed for states. And I was like, you know what? I really love this. This is such a great time. In 1 year alone, I got $40,000 or no, $20,000 to Wilkes University. And I was like, well, you know what? Even if I lose, I'm still building my education. I'm still getting scholarships to further build my education. So I then went to a local again and I won Miss Wilkes-Barre Scranton's teen and I hit the ground running. I was like, you know what? If I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it all the way. And I went to states and I'm a very much so person that just says, let go, let God. And I went into states, no worries, no anxiety, nothing at all. I was like, listen, what's meant for me, what's going to happen is going to happen. And standing on the stage, it was me and one other girl, and they called her name for runner up. And I thought they called her name for winning. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, congratulations. And she started to walk away from me. And I was like, where are you going? Like, why am I standing here by myself? And they were like, your winner is. And I was like, me? I was like, are you sure? Are you sure that's what that paper says? But it's been such a blessing. I have an amazing sisterhood behind me, and I get to go compete for Miss America's teen in Orlando this January.
Okay, well, that's great to hear too. I think you have some additional fans perhaps. And thank you for, I'm reading a few comments. Thank you for educating others on Parkinson's. This is such an important effort. Thank you. And I would like to say thank you as well on behalf of Parkinson Foundation Western Pennsylvania, because our mission is to provide programs and services and, educate, provide information. And I love how you're providing this education to all generations, especially the younger generation.
Yeah.
And good luck with your year. I know it's already in progress. I know that we'll be in touch. And thank you everyone for joining, especially family members too. I think that you may have had another family member on here as well. I hope everybody has a great day and see you again soon. Thanks again.
Well, thank you for having me. It was
You're
wonderful meeting
welcome.
all of you.
Bye, everyone. And you are an eloquent speaker. That was the last comment. Yes.
Oh,
Thank you.
thank you.
Bye-bye.